at me if I don't get going. Come on.
Yeah, I got back here really quick.
Where's Councillor Nicholson?
Start without him.
Let me print
Let's go.
Okay. Okay. A call to order regular council meeting. Welcome everybody. Again. Madam Clerk.
Thank you. First item are minutes of the regular council meeting held Monday, September 15th. The recommendation is that council approve those minutes.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Aspenson, second by Councillor Hodge. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Next item are minutes of the Coquitlam 125th Anniversary Steering Task Force meeting held August 27th. The recommendation is that council receive those for information.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Reid, second by Councillor Sikora. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 3 are minutes of the Universal Accessibility Advisory Committee meeting held September 2nd. The recommendation is that council receive those minutes.
Moved by Councillor Reid, second by Councillor Hodge. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 4 are minutes of the Sport Council meeting held September 10th. The recommendation is that council receive those.
Moved by Councillor O'Neill, second by Councillor Hodge. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Oh, good point. Okay, well, we'll actually, let's go with moved by Councillor Hodge, seconded by Councillor O'Neill. They were at the same time, and the motion is carried unanimously. And okay, have you finished arguing over that? Okay. Okay, Madam Clerk.
Next item is the recommendation arising from this evening's public hearing regarding the zoning amendment bylaw number 4502-2014, a text amendment. The recommendation is that council give second, third, and fourth and final readings to zoning amendment bylaw number 4502-2014.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Asmunson, seconded by Councillor Nicholson. All in favor?
Your Worship.
I see that. Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm glad to be able to support this text amendment. I wanted to reiterate the point that I made at first reading, that to some degree the measures taken here alleviate problems that could perhaps better be dealt with at subdivision design time, with perhaps some impact on lot yield, but an eventual creation of a better community, easier to deal with issues of setback and stuff like that. Thank you.
Thank you. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Moving on to reports of staff. Item 6 is regarding the street vending update. The recommendation is that council give first, second, and third readings to street vending and special event vending amendment bylaw number 4512-2014. 2, direct staff to issue a request for information and expression of interest for the allocation of licenses to operate vending carts on city property and keep it open so long as licenses are available, and to reissue the request for information and expression of interest when licenses become available. And 3, authorize the mayor and clerk to issue up to 10 licenses of occupation to operate vending carts and vending vehicles on city property at locations and at times to be determined by the GM Engineering and Public Works and the acting GM of Parks, Recreation and Culture Services in accordance with the bylaw.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Reid, seconded by Councillor Hodge. Councillor Nicholson.
Sorry, it didn't get off after my last.
Okay, Councillor Nicholson has yet to be turned off, he says. Councillor Sikora.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mayor. You know, I've got difficulty with this one. It's because all the businesses that we have in these different areas are paying very, very high taxes, no question about it. And then we have vendors coming in there that are taking their business away and also using the parking spaces that normally be used. And I know that they're going to probably pay for some of the parking, but you know, just especially for right here on High Street, east side of High Street between Atlantic Avenue and Glen Drive, a vending vehicle. South side of Glen and west side of High Street, another vending vehicle. So what you were doing in here is the highest taxes are being paid right there on High Street. As you know, that payment in his own business went up in taxes from $48,000 a year to, in 1 year, to $73,000 a year in 1 year. These are kind of taxes that are paid. Parking is a problem. The developer in there has taken 20 parking spaces and has fenced it off for the last year, year and a half, while he's building the third phase. When in the meantime, these merchants could be using it, that parking space, but no, because the developer is in the snip with some of the merchants in the area, because I know that he's going to court with one of the developers, no question, with one of the businesses in the area.
On the street,
so,
on the street vendors.
So those are the things that are bothering me. The fact is that, I can't believe that we're putting in so many vending in the area where they pay all the highest taxes, and they employ people. For instance, like the one on High Street there, he's employing 55 people. 55 people. Here's these vending machines. People are going to come in and they're going to put a hot dog stand or whatever it is and take some of the business away, and parking besides. So I can't support this. I think that, we're just going, and then there's west side of Johnson and Glen again, and it goes on and on and on. Let's hit the High Street and the highest taxes in the city and make it almost impossible for these places to operate. I can't support this, so I will not be supporting it. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Zarrillo.
Could I get some clarification on the difference between the vehicles and the carts? Because I'm assuming that the carts are, like, once they're there, they can't be moved for the duration of the day, or?
Okay, these aren't moving carts, they're mobile carts, right?
Through your worship, yes, that's correct. The bylaw allows for both the vehicles, for which we've had the most success in our program, and also for carts, which are without a motor vehicle component. We haven't seen that really take up yet, but with the anticipation of the Evergreen line opening soon and other sort of more festival-oriented events, there's more opportunity for the non-motor vehicle operators. So on the vending vehicles, I have to agree to some extent that we're trying to build up traffic for the restaurants and the businesses that are on Glen and on High. Like, we want to be able to make sure that those companies stay in business. But I'm also heard from residents that they'd like to have some access for areas around our parks, actually. And I don't know if maybe these were limiting by saying we can only be at these 5 locations for the vehicles. Maybe we're really limiting the opportunity. I also know around United Boulevard we have a lot of employment around there, and it might be great at lunchtime. So I'm a little nervous about restricting to these 5 locations, because we are potentially not helping the businesses that we're trying to attract in there on a long-term basis. And I would love to be able to offer this kind of service to areas where there are a higher density of people, like along United Boulevard, but not as many restaurants. So the only thing that I'm nervous about is restricting to these 5 locations for the vehicles. The carts, I'm not so worried about, because, like you said, there's not that much take up right now. But. And just for clarity, through your worship, the proposed bylaw amendment does set some sites that we have historically used, but it also allows for a catch-all of up to 4 spaces at staff's discretion, and that's really to allow for vendor-led choices. So if we have potential operators coming to us saying, I'd really like to set up on United to take advantage of this opportunity, the idea is that as long as the engineering plays out and the other traffic management issues, that we have that flexibility built in with the proposed amendment.
And just to clarify, what is the,
so I'm looking at a bunch of different numbers. So let's say a street vending vehicle wants to be at the same location for every day for a 3-month period. What is that going to cost them? Like, I'm not really understanding how this licensing is working in the daily fee versus the license.
Through your worship, the current program for vending on public property, so on roads, contemplates an annual license. We're proposing to reduce that fee to, again, continue the program, make it a viable going concern, but we're also trying to expand on the possibility of one-day licenses. So the current bylaw allows one-day vending in conjunction with special events under a special event license. It also allows one-day vending on city property, but it doesn't allow one-day vending on private property. So one of the proposed amendments in the bylaw is to have a one-day fee for private property vending, to take advantage of trade shows, other special events that may be held in private situations where somebody might want to try out mobile vending in the city but only wants to do it for that one event, see how it goes. And that's the suggestion of having a $15 one-day license.
So if a vending vehicle came into Coquitlam just for one day, let's say the day that we have the farmers market, it's only $15 for them to be there that day?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Thanks. I had somewhat similar concerns to Councillor Sikora in terms of our current businesses in the area, and I just, you know, I know we're going to have a lot of density in terms of residential towers, but would it be fair to say that most of these street vendors are more successful in areas where there's more of a workforce kind of density rather than a residential density?
Through your worship, I'm not sure that the program has had a long enough lifespan to make any kind of accurate projections about where the clientele is coming from and where it may come from in the future. What we've seen is the vendors that are most successful have been stationed up close to the college, so a population there that's neither residential nor workplace, it's more institutional. And the thought is that by concentrating it generally within a pedestrian-friendly area, you're going to find the most cross-section of commercial shoppers, residential tower, people residing in those towers, and also other people passing through our city for various recreational or educational purposes.
So I look at Douglas College as more of a workforce kind of situation, because it's not, it's people that are needing lunches, right? It's not like where it would be sort of Glen and High Street kind of thing, right? So, you know, if our businesses in that area aren't doing great now in terms of their food services, which it's my understanding that there's a bit of struggle, is there any concern that we're adding more competition to an area that's already not doing so well?
And that certainly might be something that council wishes to take into consideration in terms of designating the areas that it wishes to see these vendors operating in.
Okay. My other question, sorry, my other question was there any consideration in terms of giving a half-year license? It would be, it's my assumption, I might be wrong, but that the winter months in this area might be less successful than, you know, the 6 months over the summer kind of thing. So if I was a vendor, might be interested in having a 6-month license rather than a 1-year license. Was there any thought given to that?
Through your worship, that has not been specifically discussed. It's my understanding that we haven't had a request of that nature. The idea of the 1-year license, I think, was to encourage people to operate as much of the year as possible, allowing for some seasonal variances where they might open longer or have more staff available to provide a fuller range of services. But we would like to see those carts operating all year round.
Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor O'Neill.
Yes, thank you very much. I kind of operate under different set of assumptions that some of my colleagues operate on regarding some fundamental ideas about economics. I don't believe that there's a fixed pie that of economic wealth that's there. It just sits there, and if something like food cart or comes into the area, that it's going to take 10% of that pie, and that means that the existing people who used to have 100% will only get 90%. That's just, this is not an ideological thing on my part. There's nothing to support that sort of an argument or that sort of a view of economics. I would say that in an instance like this, that new markets are being created, that a food cart that's let's say right outside of Douglas College isn't going to take away somebody who would spend an hour and a quarter sitting at a restaurant a couple blocks away or even across the street, but is actually going to entice a person who might have otherwise packed a lunch, let's say. So if we really want to be concerned about what the economic impact would be, maybe we should, touch base with SuperValue or the IGA or Safeway or something like that, because maybe they'll be selling a little less bread and sliced cheese and cans of tuna. But you know what? That's going down an Alice in Wonderland kind of thing. We're creating primarily in something like this a new business opportunity. I think we are expanding services. We are responding to what's clearly a growing public demand for things like this. I mean, just look at how popular these food carts are in some of the bigger metropolitan areas around North America, at least. I mean, you see TV shows about these things. Young people are buying packages of 5 and 6, so you go and sample and spend the afternoon sampling the different food carts in Vancouver. These things are very popular. I think they are actually adding to the economy. It's not a fixed pie. This pie is actually growing. So the eating out, the restaurants, the food carts, it's a growing base here. It's a growing pie. It's not slicing in to a one-size pie that's not getting bigger. So I really don't know. I really can't see how an existing restaurant serves liquor, has air conditioning, has all of its big menu and everything like that, is going to be able to complain too much about somebody who sells 2 or 3 things, that somebody who caters to a clientele where that clientele probably just wants to spend 5 minutes there standing in line getting the piece of the food, the hot dog or whatever. Well, it's better food than that. And then walking back to class or walking back to the library, walking back to the study room or something like that. So I cannot see any rational grounds for opposing this on that particular objection. So I'll be supporting this.
It would be down the rabbit hole. Councillor Hodge.
Okay, so in principle, I like the idea of the food carts, but I am concerned about location. I like the idea of the food carts because it allows us certainly to serve food in some parts of the city where we don't have those food services. And I can see them possibly being popular outside of schools. I can see them being popular in areas where we have a lot of construction workers, the ability to go in, set up for a short period of time, only be there on Monday to Friday when there's a demand for it. I think those are all things that we should be trying to achieve. Certainly out in front of Douglas College, I can see it at SkyTrain stations, and I think there's a lot of community events. So those, I think, those are my ideas of mobile. But I do have a problem when we have them going in and setting up in front of restaurants or in areas with restaurants. And as much as I believe that, that they're different clientele, I also believe that there has to be some sort of a level playing field, and to have businesses that are paying high rent, that are paying high taxes, to then have somebody that basically able to just sort of roll in for a few hours in front. To me, that's not a level playing field. I think the idea to me from mobile is to go to places where you can't have restaurants. And so I'm to me, I find a couple of the locations a little problematic. In principle, I like the idea of the food carts, but in areas where there's little parking, where there's already food services available, that to me is not mobile. That's on the verge of sort of squatting and being in front. I would be very concerned if somebody was selling coffee and then decided to set up in front of a coffee shop. That, to me, is not what the intent is. Some of the locations here, I think, are great. You know, some places down in places in Mayardville where we don't have the food services. I suggest that possibly I can think of a couple of places up on Burke Mountain where there's lots of construction workers, high traffic areas where we don't have restaurants up there yet. So, to me, that's what mobile is. It's the ability to come in, provide a service to the customer and leave, but not disrupt existing businesses. And I struggle with how we sort of achieve the intent of this bylaw, but not create any unfair, disadvantages for some of the existing businesses. So I'm going to listen to the rest of my colleagues on this one, but I find that the High Street and the Glen Street one, to me, are problematic, given that we're in the area of food services and pubs and restaurants in there right now. Thank you.
Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm going to speak on this, but I had to take the opportunity to agree with Councillor O'Neill, because sometimes we don't, but everything he said is completely accurate. And I would add a little more to the pie and make it even a little larger. I was thinking about pi as being 22/7, which is kind of an infinite number. You can't ever reduce it. Because I think one of the significant parts, and I do favor mobile vending in the High Street and on Glen and in locations like that, because what it does is it adds a vibrancy and a flavor to our community that wasn't there before. It gives people reason to be on the street and reason to notice the other businesses and services in that neighborhood. And that's how I believe it continues to expand the pie. Thank you.
Councillor Rasmussen.
Well, thank you very much, and I thank Councillor Nicholson for his comments. I mean, I think from what I've been in Vancouver a lot that there's been quite the expansion. I think the same comments and concerns are raised in Vancouver, and I think Councillor Nicholson explained that it's created more vibrancy on the street. It has not taken away business from the restaurants downtown that they even thought when it first came out was going to do. That's actually increased businesses and put more people out on the street and created that vibrancy. And when you go downtown Vancouver, Burrard area, they're right across from restaurants. They're right out in front. But it's a different clientele, but it's created. And I think, I've always said about this, we need to create that vibrancy and life in our downtown core. We need to create a place that's walkable where people want to walk, notice the shops, and get out and around. And we don't have that right now. So I just want to echo Councillor Nicholson's comments about the vibrancy and the need for the increased vibrancy in that area, and I think this can help do it. And I would also point out, if I'm not correct, through the staff, that Glen Street was a location already that was in the bylaw, if I'm not correct. We had a location on Glen.
Yes.
Through Your Worship, yes, this is an existing location.
Yes, so it was passed by council previously before, and it's always been there. It wasn't a new location being put in. Thank you.
Okay, I'll weigh in very quickly. I'm of the mind that this doesn't take away from a limited pie. It does expand the pie to some degree, but I think I can sense the legitimacy of a concern. For example, if I operate a bubble tea restaurant on Glen and I have a food cart that sets up outside my restaurant, and now there's a bubble tea competitor that is right outside my door. And I don't know the extent to which we can enable a restriction on the similarity of vending cart, menu items, sorts of things. And I'm going to keep talking only because they're conferring on an answer, and whether or not we can restrict similar components.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, the request for expression of interest process did contemplate conflicting business as one of the criteria that were looked at when businesses were offered a particular location. And in the context of the specific query about bubble tea, it's my understanding that the cart predated the fixed business in that site.
And in fact, that the complaint might be lodged in reverse. That said, I agree with those that would argue that Urban Gate, for example, is a high-quality restaurant. It's a established restaurant. It's got a liquor license. It's good. There's a food. It's a different style of food service. It's not a food service that you're going to. It's not a stand-up pizza place. It's a different kind of restaurant, and and we really haven't heard from the business community about their hesitation. I actually thought we might hear from Douglas College about their concerns, about any concerns they might have had that the Happy Pig, Little Piggy, what was it, Little Piggy or something, was outside their place because the lineup was very long, and yet you saw that there probably wasn't a significant impact on the restaurant inside of the food services that were inside the college, or for that matter, the food services that were somewhat available over at Pine Tree. So I don't think I have that hesitation. I would have had more hesitation if we'd heard more from more businesses about their concerns related to that, and so I'll be supporting this expression of interest as a way of rejuvenating and making more exciting our city centre. All in favor? All opposed? Councillor Sikora, Hodge, Cirillo, and Wilson are opposed. Yeah, the motion passes. Madam Clerk.
Next item, item 7, is a notice of motion regarding the Fraser Surrey Dock Transfer Coal Facility. The recommendation is that Council give consideration to the following notice of motion presented by Councillor Wilson and seconded by Councillor Nicholson at the September 15th regular Council meeting. That the City write a similarly worded letter as the one sent by the City of New Westminster on August 29th to Port Metro Vancouver in order to highlight our concerns with the process by which the Fraser Surrey Docks Direct Transfer Coal Facility project was approved, and that this letter be copied to the Prime Minister, the Premier of British Columbia, the Chair of Metro Vancouver, and any other organization or government body which staff may identify as having a primary interest in the matter.
Councillor Wilson.
I guess before I get into what I was going to say about that, is it possible to make an amendment to my notice of motion, the wording?
You have to consider the amendment next week. I'm kidding.
I just want to take two words out to make it simpler. I want to take out similarly worded. So it would be that the city write a letter.
And then everything is in brackets as well. The newest does that come out?
You can take the stuff out of the brackets as well. That the city write a letter to Port Metro Vancouver.
I'll second that.
Highlighting our concerns with the process.
Okay. Discussion on the amendment. All in favor of the amendment? All opposed? The amendment carries unanimously. The amended motion. Councillor Wilson.
That's what I had. I was going to do
No.
Come on, Councillor Wilson.
Okay, seeing as I took the wind out of Councillor O'Neill's sails, I didn't realize that, but yeah, this was all about process, and it was about not giving communities proper consultation in something that could definitely affect them. It was also about not using our health experts in their risk assessment. The Chief Medical Health Officer of Fraser Health wasn't consulted. The Provincial Chief Medical Health Officer wasn't consulted. So the people who are in charge of the health of our communities weren't consulted. During the hearing process, a number of cities passed resolutions opposing this project. Metro Vancouver passed a motion supporting the call for a proper health impact assessment and opposing any further expansion of coal shipments in the Fraser River. All of this was ignored in the process. Even last week up at the UBCM conference, a resolution was passed unanimously, or an overwhelming majority, maybe not unanimously, that a proper environmental and health impact assessment be made. So this expansion really is in a lot of people's opinion, poorly thought out. The proper consultation wasn't done. And to a large extent, it's about dumping U.S. thermal coal, the dirtiest, most polluting coal available. And the reason there's so much pressure on us to accept these shipments in the Lower Mainland is because no U.S. port cities are willing to allow expansion or new ports for this type of coal. So for those reasons, I think it's important that we stand up for our community and we take a stand when the proper process isn't followed. And I think it's very important that Port Metro Vancouver hear from all parties who are concerned about the process and the result of their decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor O'Neill.
Yeah, thank you very much. I had proposed a similar, I was thinking of doing a similar amendment, so I'm happy that Councillor Wilson came up with that, because you might remember that when last this came up before this, our council, that I had great concerns with the quality and the content of the New Westminster letter, and I didn't want to be following them. When we talk about the process and limit it to that by which this decision was reached, I think we're on very solid grounds there, because there's not too many people that like the way, the arbitrary way that decisions involving Port Metro Vancouver are made. So we want to see changes in the process for a lot of their decisions, not just this one. So I think generally speaking, that's something we've talked about before in a lot of different areas. So yeah, let more people that can weigh in on this with more expertise, the better. It should be noted, and Councillor Wilson got into some of the actual details of his objection. I'm not, I think the way this motion reads now doesn't put us in a position of having to weigh all the positives and the negatives, however many on each side there may be, in terms of whether this is a good proposal or a bad proposal. I frankly did not have time to do that, and you know, Port Metro Vancouver hired SNC Lavalin to do a report on it, and there was other people have done reports on this. We haven't asked our staff to actually look into what's good and what's bad about the coal thing. We've read stuff in the papers, that's fine. So I'm not willing to go, and so that's another reason why I wanted it worded the way it's now going to be worded if this amendment passes. So this focuses on the process and the lack of getting proper input from all the authorities in Metro Vancouver, be they health, be they political, be they transportation, be they planners. And so I think I'm very happy to support this the way it's worded now. Support the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sikora.
Thank you very much. Well, I don't know about the positive or the negative. I can't see anything positive about our taking coal from the United States into Canada to ship, because no port in the United States will take that product to be shipped out of there. There's certainly, you know, instead of coming to Vancouver, they can go to Seattle. And certainly Seattle doesn't want it. So, you know, there's no positive. It's all negative. I mean, we're going to take all the pollution and everything else. But however, I did support the motion, and it's fine. But I'll tell you something. Does it sit good with me? Not at all. Not at all. I think that, you know what, we can have as many studies as we want. There's nothing going to be that's positive about this whole thing. None of it. Thank you.
Okay. I actually had concerns at Metro Vancouver as well. I think the part of my concern, though, is the process that we get, how we get here, and how municipalities don't have a say in some of the port activities when the port buys agricultural land, for example, and converts it to industrial, because it seems to have that power to override local government and regional government, and that's a concern for me as well. The motion is before us as amended. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. That'll tell them.
That concludes the items on this evening's agenda.
Motion to adjourn from Councillor Asmundson, seconded by Councillor O'Neill. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Are there any questions from the audience on tonight's agenda? Any question on the audience on tonight's agenda? Any questions at all? Thank you all for coming. Have a good evening.